Welcome to OncoPharm. I'm your host, John Bazar. I'm a professor of pharmacy practice at ETSU's Bill Gatton College of Pharmacy, and this episode is sponsored by Kelly C. PharmD, an oncology education company for pharmacists. Today, just kind of opening up the notebook, got a lot of stuff, four kind of topics to talk about. We're going to start with IMHOTEP, a phase 2 study of pembrolizumab in mismatch repair deficient or MSI high colorectal cancers. And the reason I want to talk about it is really an excuse to talk about The Mummy, 1999 film starring Brendan Fraser, where the antagonist is IMHOTEP, and that's the name of the study. After watching this movie, I was probably 16 at the time and was like, I think I'm going to be an Egyptologist. This seems like the coolest job ever. It didn't turn out that way. This is perioperative pembrolizumab, and it's a phase 2 study, so it's a single-arm phase 2 study. What can you take from this? Not a whole lot. But I think it does maybe foreshadow where things are going in mismatch repair deficient cancer. Of course, we know the great data of dostarlimab in the neoadjuvant setting, potentially even being definitive treatment for mismatch repair deficient rectal cancer. This is colon cancer, and so they enroll about 80 patients, and they're giving them 1 or 2 doses of Pembro 400 every 6 months, and of the 72 that could be included in the efficacy population have a pathologic complete response rate, which is the primary endpoint, meaning they do the surgery, no evidence of cancer in the tissue. That PCR rate was 53%. And then when they look at those who got 1 dose versus 2 doses, 1 dose, the PCR rate was 46%. 2 doses was 68.2% after they got 2 doses. And then they would go on and get a year of adjuvant pembrolizumab. Now, with the median follow-up of about 2 years, there were 3 cases of disease recurrence. So going to be necessary to see an ICI approach only compared to a combination of maybe perioperative immune checkpoint inhibitor followed by immune checkpoint inhibitor plus or minus chemo. I'm sure phase 3 studies are ongoing, but that is where we're going. This we'll call this the IMHOTEP approach. The next paper to talk about is not purely oncology related, but is supportive care. And this was published in the Annals of Pharmacotherapy. A group of pharmacists and some physicians have published this. This is pneumocystis jirovecii pneumonia in non-HIV, non-stem cell transplant adults, real-world patterns. And so they're using this TriNetX research network, and they have access to patients from 2011, 2014 with PJP, but they don't have HIV. They weren't on an allo stem cell transplant unit, okay? Many of these patients would have been oncology patients, though, and they've identified 578 patients with PJP. Almost all of these, 87%, received glucocorticoids. And then more than half of these cases, they were exposed to two immunosuppressants. So glucocorticoids plus an antineoplastic or glucocorticoids plus an actual immunosuppressant, like, say, Cellcept. They don't go into a ton of evidence or a ton of detail in what doses of glucocorticoids these patients are on, the duration of glucocorticoid, or what these other immunosuppressants are, at least in the primary manuscript. What is notable and is scary is that there are more than 180 cases, 187, where patients develop PJP while on PJP prophylaxis. At least within 90 days they were on this, most of the time being Bactrim, Trimsulfa. A lot of these patients who in this cohort were on more than 2 at the same time. And of those that were on multiple medications, only 32% received PJP prophylaxis. So something that I think we're pretty, at least in the oncology committee, pretty liberal with prescribing PJP prophylaxis. But there's some real-world evidence here that, as a society, we could do better at preventing this. So this is a useful supportive care literature to have on hand for folks. There's some sneaky recommendations, like brentuximab vedotin regimens in our favorite guidelines for Hodgkin's lymphoma. Those guidelines say to do PJP prophylaxis on folks on brentuximab vedotin, even though I don't think that's in the label. A lot of listeners to this pod tune in because they're new to oncology, they're trying to get up to speed, or they appreciate quick weekly updates to help keep pace with all this new information coming out in oncology. Well, if this sounds like you, check out the Oncology Insights newsletter. It's a free weekly email right to your inbox, written by fellow Uncle Farm Kelly C. Kelly Carlstrom, who is the Kelly C in Kelly C Farm D. She's the founder and runner of the ELO Collaborative Program. Each week, this newsletter shares practical pearls, ways to think through oncology concepts without just memorizing guidelines, and insights on staying motivated to grow in your practice. It's written by a pharmacist for pharmacists, and it's easy to read. You can sign up using the link in the show notes. Okay, now we're entering the section of the podcast called You Heard It Here First. This is a publication that's a research letter, so it's a really short and sweet research called Ivermectin Benzimidazole Prescribing Following Celebrity Endorsement. This was published in JAMA Network Open, and this is, if you go back to probably the beginning of the year, maybe it was last year, I did an episode about ivermectin and similar drugs for cancer. And during that, I think I actually have slides on the YouTube channel where you point out the date of this episode of the Joe Rogan Experience and then the spike in research in the Google Trends, and you can see that. And so what these researchers have done, Michelle Rockwell's the lead author on this, is they used the TriNetX Research Network, the same as the previous PJP publication, which I wasn't familiar with, and I've had to look into it. Might be an option for some research opportunities for folks. So they went through the EHR of this TriNetX network that has access to 67 healthcare organizations. They look at prescribing practices for the combination of ivermectin and benzimidazole, and they have the date of this celebrity endorsement, which was in January of 2025. And you can see in the prescriptions per 1,000 patients, just a huge spike in this co-prescribing immediately after that podcast. It's bubbling up a little bit in 23 and 24, but there's a huge spike that you don't need any statistical analysis to see. And I think clearly shows the power of podcasts. It's silly for me to say, but the ability of podcasts and information that in this case is not accurate. We don't have good evidence that this helps for cancer. How quickly this can spread in the community. And this was picked up by the New York Times. I read about it in the New York Times. That's how I found out about this study. And then also, on our April 23rd episode, I talked about the promising pancreatic cancer developments and the drug diroxonrasib, and how this looked like it's going to be a really big drug, second-line pancreatic cancer. And then less than a week after that podcast, or about a week after that podcast, the FDA announced that they had allowed expanded access to this drug. What this means is you've got a patient with pancreatic adenocarcinoma that has progressed on chemotherapy. You can get access to this drug even though it's not commercially available or FDA approved yet. To do so, you do have to fill out some paperwork. You have to go through the early access program. You got to have a treatment protocol to do this, and a new treatment application like you're studying a new drug. It is quite a bit of paperwork to do, I'm told. However, because of this program, if you go through that, a lot of times the FDA can turn those requests around in about 2 days. This is going to, I'm kind of inferring that this means, I think it's almost a foregone conclusion this drug will be FDA approved, 1. 2, when it is approved, this tells me that there is enough drug supply that it should hopefully be commercially available relatively quickly, because there are lots of patients who are going to be in need of a drug because we don't have great options for this. And this was also talked about in an article in the New York Times about the great progress we've made in the undruggable RAS proto-oncogene and protein. So good stuff coming down here with diroxonrasib. So that is what I have for you this week. Thank you so much for listening. You can follow me on X at FarmDeepNip and follow the podcast on other social media platforms at Uncle Farm Pod. And until I talk to you again, remember, doses matter.